The morning my lawyer walked into my youngest daughter's kitchen and set that envelope on the table, I watched my two older sons go completely still. Not the kind of still that comes from surprise, the kind that comes from understanding exactly what you did wrong and knowing there's no way to undo it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Arthur Hollis. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years building a commercial roofing company from nothing. Just me, a used truck, and a willingness to climb in the heat when nobody else wanted to. By the time I sold it, I had contracts across 4 states and enough money that my accountant told me I'd never need to worry again. I didn't advertise that. Never saw the point. I drove the same Ford F-150 I'd had for a decade. I still got my hair cut at the same barber shop in Greensboro where I'd gone since I was 32. My wife Patrice passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to gone. There's no way to explain that kind of loss to someone who hasn't lived it. You just wake up one day and the house is the same house. The coffee maker is the same coffee maker, and none of it makes any sense without her in it. After she died, I started noticing things. My oldest son, Brendan, called on holidays. Sometimes. He lives in Charlotte, does something in finance that I've never fully understood, drives a car that costs more than my first house. His wife is polite the way people are polite to someone they're waiting to stop talking. They have 2 kids, I've seen maybe a dozen times. My middle son, Philip, lives in Raleigh. He's an orthodontist, good at it from what I understand. He married a woman named Susan, who organizes charity galas and speaks in a voice that always sounds like she's presenting something. Philip calls more than Brendan, but our conversations have a way of ending up on one topic, money, not in a blunt way, in a circling way. He'd mention the practice was expanding, then pause just long enough. And then there's my daughter, Nora. Nora is 34. She married a man named Dale 6 years ago. Dale fixes HVAC systems for a living. He drives a van with the company name on the side, comes home smelling like metal and refrigerant, and once spent an entire Thanksgiving explaining to my granddaughter how a heat pump worked using a juice box and a bendy straw. He is the least impressive person my children married, by every measure my older 2 would use. He is also, without question, the best one. They live in a small house in Concord, 3 bedrooms. Nora works part-time at a dental office, and they're raising 2 kids, 9 and 6, in a house where the backyard has a vegetable garden and a tire swing and a dog named Biscuit, who is overweight and completely unapologetic about it. I started spending more time there after Patrice died, not because I'd planned it that way, just because it was the only place where it felt like I hadn't accidentally wandered into someone else's life. The idea came to me on a Tuesday night in October, 8 months after I'd finalized the sale of the company. I called Brendan that afternoon. Not for any particular reason. I'd seen a thing on the news about a bridge collapse in Charlotte and I wanted to hear his voice. He answered on the 3rd ring and told me he was just heading into a dinner. I said it was fine, I just wanted to check in. He said, "I'll call you this weekend, Dad." He didn't call that weekend. He didn't call the weekend after. I sat in my kitchen that Tuesday night and looked at the numbers on my phone. 2 sons who had never gone without anything. Both of them put through school. Brendan through Wake Forest, Philip through UNC Chapel Hill, and then dental school at the University of Tennessee. Between the 2 of them, I paid out somewhere around $400,000 in tuition, housing, and the kinds of small emergencies that aren't really emergencies. A car that needed replacing, a down payment that needed a boost, a practice loan that needed a cosigner. I kept thinking about something Patrice said to me once, maybe 5 years before she died. We'd just gotten off the phone with Brendan, who'd called to ask about borrowing money for a beach house investment that fell apart 6 months later. She sat quiet for a minute and then said, "I wonder if they'd help us if we ever really needed it." I'd told her not to think that way. Now I sat alone in my kitchen and I thought, I need to know. I want to be honest about something. I was not truly desperate, I knew that. I had a house that was paid off, a brokerage account that my financial advisor checked on quarterly, and Social Security that more than covered my utilities. What I was doing was a test, and I knew it was a test, and that knowledge sat in the back of my mind the whole time like a stone in a shoe. But I also think there's a difference between despair about money and despair about something else. What I needed to know wasn't whether my sons would let me starve. What I needed to know was whether they would look at me, their father, 67 years old, standing in a parking lot in worn-out clothes, asking for help, and see me as a person they loved. I told no one except my lawyer, a man named Herb Staton, who has handled my affairs for 20 years and who, when I explained what I wanted to do, looked at me for a long moment and said, "Arthur, that is either the wisest thing I've ever heard or the craziest. Possibly both." I withdrew $300 in cash. I put on a jacket I'd bought at Goodwill for $6, jeans that had seen better years, boots with a crack along the right sole. I left my wallet at home. I took my phone, but only a basic prepaid one I'd bought at a gas station, not my regular cell. And on a Thursday morning in November, I drove to Charlotte and parked my truck 3 miles from Brendan's house. Then I walked. I want to tell you that it felt freeing or clarifying or some other word that sounds like a lesson. It didn't. It felt cold, and it felt slow. And by the time I got within a block of Brendan's neighborhood, my right knee, which has never been the same since I fell off a roof in 2009, was talking to me in a way I didn't appreciate. Brendan's house is the kind of house that announces itself. 4-car garage, professional landscaping, a front door that probably cost more to install than the first vehicle I ever owned. I rang the bell and waited. He answered in a dress shirt, still buttoned at the collar. He looked at me and I watched the exact moment he recognized me. A small narrowing of the eyes, then a careful blankness. "Dad, why are you dressed like that?" I told him I'd had some trouble, that things had taken a bad turn financially, faster than I'd expected. I kept my voice level. I told him I wasn't sure where I was going to sleep that night, and I asked if I could stay for a few days while I figured things out. He looked past me, down the street, then back at me. "Dad," he said, and his voice had shifted into something managerial, "this is not a great time. We've got the Harmon dinner on Saturday, and Susan's mother is flying in on Sunday. The guest room is basically all ready." "I could sleep on the couch," I said. There was a pause that lasted about 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, I watched my son decide something. "Dad, I really think you should call someone, like a professional. There are resources for." He stopped, started again. "I can give you some money. Hold on." He disappeared and came back with $200 in 20s. He held them out like he was completing a transaction. "This should help you get sorted," he said. "And seriously, call me when things are more stable." The door closed. I stood on that porch for a moment. I looked at the money in my hand. The bills were crisp and new the way money is when someone takes it from an envelope they keep in a home office, not from a wallet they carry. I walked back to where I'd left the truck. I didn't drive. I sat in the cab and looked at the steering wheel for a while. I called Philip the next morning. I told him the same thing. Trouble I hadn't seen coming. Nothing to fall back on right now. Asking for a place to stay just for a short while. I asked if I could come over. He met me in the driveway. I think he didn't want me to ring the bell. "Dad, honestly, I don't even know where this is coming from," he said. He was already in his coat, keys in hand, like he had somewhere to be. "You had the business. You had." "Things happen," I said. He exhaled. "I can help you financially, okay? I can do that." He pulled out his phone and, right there in the driveway, sent me $250 on Venmo. To my regular number, which he didn't know I wasn't carrying. "But we've got a lot going on right now, Dad. The new location is eating us alive and the kids earned 3 things each," and Ish trailed off. "You understand?" I told him I understood. I drove north. I want to tell you about the second night, because it matters. I hadn't planned to actually stay anywhere cold. I told myself I'd spend the nights in the truck if I needed to, but I wanted to understand something. So on Friday night, I sat on a bench outside a Waffle House on Highway 29 for about 2 hours. Just to feel it, not the cold exactly, but the specific quality of the light when you're outside it looking in. People passing without making eye contact. The way the parking lot felt enormous when you had nowhere to go from it. An older man sat down next to me at some point. He didn't ask me anything, which I appreciated. He'd pulled a Snickers bar from his jacket pocket, and he broke it in half and held out the other half without looking at me. I took it. I thanked him. He nodded. I don't know that man's name. I thought about him for a long time after. I got to Nora and Dale's house around dinner time on Saturday. I'd walked from where I parked and it was getting dark, and Biscuit heard me coming before I knocked and started barking that low, happy bark. That means someone familiar is approaching. Nora opened the door and her face did something immediate and unguarded, the way faces do when they haven't had time to arrange themselves. Dad, what happened? Get inside. That was the whole greeting. She sat me down at the kitchen table, the one with the wobble on the left side that Dale has been meaning to fix for 2 years, and put a bowl of beef stew in front of me before she asked a single question. It was from a pot that was already going. She hadn't made it for me. She just moved over and made space at the table. I told her the same thing I told the others. I watched her face while I talked. She wasn't calculating. She wasn't managing. She was just listening in that way some people do, where you can tell they're already thinking about what they can do, not about what it will cost them. You're staying here, she said. It wasn't a question. Nora, I don't want to put you out. You've got the kids and… The couch pulls out, she said. The sheets are clean. Dad, you're staying here. Dale came in from the garage 20 minutes later, still in his work clothes, and Nora explained the situation in about 4 sentences. He nodded, looked at me, and said, "We got you, Arthur." Then he went and washed his hands and came back and sat down for dinner like nothing had changed, because as far as he was concerned, nothing had. I slept on that pull-out couch for 2 nights. My granddaughter made me a drawing of a house with a sun above it and my name written at the top in pink marker. My grandson showed me a YouTube video about a man who builds things out of scrap metal. I ate 3 meals I hadn't cooked, sat in a living room that smelled like a dog and someone's detergent, and I thought about Patrice more than once in a way that felt okay rather than unbearable. On Sunday evening, I excused myself from the table after dinner and called Herb. Monday morning, I said, "Come to Nora's." I won't say I slept peacefully that night, but I slept. Herb arrived at 9 in the morning with a leather folder under his arm and a professionalism I've always found both reassuring and slightly alarming. Nora was clearing breakfast dishes. Dale was on his way out to a job but stopped when he saw a man in a suit walking up the front path. I called Brendan and Philip that morning. I told them I needed them to come to Nora's, that there was something important. I didn't say what. Brendan arrived 40 minutes later, Philip an hour after that. They both looked at the house with the kind of face people make when they're trying to be polite about a neighborhood they've already judged. We all sat in the living room. Biscuit was in the corner. My granddaughter was at school. The wobble table was in the kitchen. I let Herb start. He explained that he was my attorney of 20 years, that he was there to present the updated structure of my estate, and that at the time of my passing, or at my discretion, which I had exercised, the distribution would proceed as follows. Brennan started to say something. I held up one hand and he stopped. The estate, Herb explained, was valued at approximately $4.2 million. This included the proceeds from the sale of the business, existing investments, real property, and liquid assets. Nora had gone completely still next to Dale on the couch. The distribution, Herb continued, was as follows. Each of my 3 children would receive an equal share of the financial assets. That meant approximately $1.2 million each, after taxes and fees. However, and here Herb paused in the way that lawyers pause when they want you to understand that the however is the point. The house, which had been my primary residence and which held the most personal significance, along with my remaining personal effects and certain items of Patrice's, would go entirely to Nora. Additionally, effective immediately, I was establishing a college fund of $100,000 each for Nora's 2 children. No such fund existed for my older son's children. That was intentional, and the reason was this. Brendan and Philip had both told me at various points over the past several years that their children's educations were already planned for. I believed them. Nora and Dale had never said that because they were still figuring out how. Brendan was red by this point. Not loudly, he's not a loud man, but red in the face and tight around the jaw. "Dad," he said, "you need to understand that I didn't know." "I know," I said. "You didn't know I had money, that's the point." Philip started in about how it wasn't fair to judge them for one situation, one moment, one door. I let him talk. Then I asked him one question. Did you look for somewhere for me to sleep? He didn't answer. Not in a hotel, I said. Not somewhere I could go sort myself out. Somewhere to sleep. Did you look? He looked at the floor. I want to be clear about one thing. I did not do this for revenge. I've heard that word applied to what I did, and it doesn't sit right. Revenge implies I wanted them to suffer. What I wanted was to understand something, and I understood it, and understanding it meant I needed to adjust accordingly, not out of punishment, but out of honesty. Patrice always said that how you treat people when nothing's in it for you is the only real measure of anything. She was right. She usually was. Brendan and Philip left before noon. Brendan said very little on the way out. Philip said he needed time to process. I told them both I loved them, because I do, and because that's not something I'm willing to let go of, even now. Nora sat at the kitchen table for a long time after they left. Dale had stayed, his job call pushed back. He had one hand on top of hers. Dad, she said finally, you didn't have to do this. I know, I said. We weren't helping you because of this. I know that too, I said. That's exactly why. I ended up staying for dinner that evening. Dale fixed the wobble on the table while Nora made pasta. My grandson showed me 3 more YouTube videos. I called Brendan before bed and told him I was sorry for how hard that morning had been, and I meant it. He didn't say much, but he stayed on the line for a few minutes, which felt like something. I still drive the same truck. I still get my hair cut in Greensboro. Some things don't need to change just because everything else does. But I think about that man on the bench outside the Waffle House sometimes. The one with the Snickers bar. The one who gave half to a stranger without asking a single question. Patrice would have liked him. I keep thinking about that bowl of beef stew. Nora didn't make it for me. It was already on the stove when I showed up looking like I'd walked in from somewhere hard. She just moved over and made room. No questions first. No hesitation. Just a bowl, a spoon, and a chair pulled out from the table. That's the thing about character. You can't fake it, and you can't manufacture it on short notice. Brendan handed me $200 in crisp 20s and closed the door. Philip sent money through his phone without putting it down. Both of them did something that looked like help. Neither of them actually helped. There's a distance between those two things that I spent 67 years not fully understanding, and 2 days pretending to be broke taught me more about it than 3 decades of watching my sons grow up. What I was really testing wasn't their generosity. I had enough to retire twice over. I wasn't looking for money. What I was looking for was whether they'd see me. Not the version of me that built the business and paid the tuition and co-signed the loans. Just me, a man getting older, standing on a porch, asking for a place to land. Brendan and Philip are not bad people. I want to say that clearly. They are people who got comfortable enough that discomfort in others started to feel like a problem to be managed rather than a person to be helped. That happens slowly. You don't notice it happening. One day you're a kid who cried when the neighbor's dog got hit by a car, and another day you're a man who sends money via an app so you don't have to look someone in the eyes. Life does that to people if they let it. Comfort does that. I'm not without fault in it. I gave them everything they needed and not enough of what would have made them stronger. Dale is not an educated man by the measure most people use. He fixes heating and cooling systems for a living. He comes home with grease on his hands. He fixed a wobbling table leg on a Sunday while his wife made pasta. But Dale has something that took me a long time to name properly. A kind of moral steadiness that doesn't move based on what's convenient. When Nora told him I was in trouble, he didn't calculate, he didn't weigh it. He just said, "We got you," and sat down for dinner. That's not a small thing. That is, in fact, the whole thing. I've been thinking about what I want my grandchildren to understand when they're old enough. Not the money, not the house, not any of it. I want them to understand that how you treat someone when you have nothing to gain from it is the only honest version of who you are. That the ability to think clearly about what actually matters, not what looks good, not what's comfortable, but what's true, is worth more than any degree I could pay for. And that the willingness to keep showing up, to sit with someone in a hard moment even when it costs you something, is a form of strength that doesn't announce itself. Patrice knew that. She lived it every day of our marriage, and I didn't always say so. Dale knows it without having been taught it. I hope one day Brendan and Philip find their way back to it too. I think they will. I'm going to give them the chance. That wobbling table is fixed now. I had dinner there again last Thursday.